Now, looking in these seed trays beside me, what you're seeing here is a crop of Magnolia seedlings just starting to come up. Some of them are only just emerging from the ground, and you see the first two cotyledons before you get any normal growth which you can recognize as a magnolia. And we collected these seed last autumn. We kept them over winter in moist but dampish conditions, but away from mice or anything else which could do damage to them. And we sow about 40 seed in a tray. And we put them in really about first or second week of March, and you don't expect them all to germinate at once. Indeed, if you look here, you can see that there are still seedlings coming up. And these ones here are clearly have taken longer to germinate than others. This year, some years you'll get a full house and 40 seedlings will come up. Some years, as this year, the germination rate is much more variable. Clearly a slug has nipped in, or perhaps a mouse, and gnawed off one there. But there's still time for a few more seedlings to come. And if you look around in the other trays, you'll see that they're all at different stages of growth, and some of them we've been growing in individual pots, and some have come up like mustard and cress and are doing very well. Others are still a bit of a way behind. So what have we? This is a mixture of finely sieved ordinary soil with a bit of grit, and deliberately with moss over the top to try and create the sort of growing conditions that if this seed was in the wild and it dropped to the ground, the sort of conditions where it would be expected to germinate. But it's all very well having got these lovely little seedlings going. We could leave them in these seed trays until next spring and pop them on then, and probably that's the best thing to do, because they're not that thick, there aren't that many. But when alternatively we look in some of these pots, we've obviously got far too many small plants growing far too close together, and so we need to prick them out and start them going in their own little pots. So Ash has got a nice pot full of young Magnolia seedlings. This is Magnolia Cahay's Surprise, which is one of our favourite spring flowering magnolias here. And there's a nice little pot full, but it's time they were pricked out and moved on, so they can grow on better. There's very little soil in there, and they're all their roots are getting tangled up together, and they've started to come through the bottom of the pot. So it's time that they were very gently prized away from each other. It's probably a job that's best done on a overcast and not too hot a day, because that gives them a better chance to get going. So you've got a lot of root for quite a small pot, but at least in a pot on their own, they can start to make proper growth before the autumn. Now obviously that'll need watering in, and really once you've started, you've got to go on and finish the whole lot. But it doesn't take long. And you've got a plant that will grow on now, and hopefully it'll double in size before the winter comes and it loses its leaves, and then next spring it'll be ready to go on into a 1 litre, 1.5 litre pot, and on we go. By potting them now, you'll get much more growth than you would have in those wooden trays, because you'll give them an extra boost into some nice compost with some slow release fertilizer. And so out of that pot full, we've ended up with about 10 or a dozen plants, which can all now be potted up, and we should have something which can be grown on. A magnolia like this will probably need to remain in a pot for 2 or 3 years until it gets up to about 2 feet in height. Maybe in the second or the third summer you can stand it outside to harden it up a bit, and really it needs to be about 3 foot tall So probably in year 4 before you can risk, or it's large enough to risk planting it out. Anyway, it's been a successful propagating year for magnolias, and it's great to see another generation of plants, another generation of Cahays magnolias being propagated so well.